Thank you for joining us today. I'm Representative Tony McCombie. I represent the 71st District, which is parts of Carroll, Whiteside, Henry, and Rock Island counties. Last week, DCFS Director Mark Smith was held in contempt of court for allegedly not meeting the needs of two children, a 9-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy. They were left sitting in facilities for months, even though they were ready to be placed with families. We are here today to continue our call for immediate public hearings. DCFS is failing our state's most vulnerable children, and we need transparency and public hearings about why. These two children are not certainly the only ones failed by DCFS in the state of Illinois. As legislators, we have heard repeated stories of DCFS wards being left to linger in hospital beds when they no longer need the hospital care because DCFS did not have proper placement lined up for time of discharge. According to the Cook County Public Guardian, over the past year, more than 350 children in DCFS care were languishing in psychiatric hospitals an average of 55 days for no other reason other than DCFS had nowhere else to place them. This is unacceptable and a repeated finding. I understand that when Director Smith took over in 2019, there were 500 residential and group homes beds previously eliminated. The director stated that over the last couple of years, they have worked to increase those numbers and to rebuild the supply of beds needed. How many have been replaced? What measures have been taken? These are questions that need to be asked on the record. In addition to failing our state's children's, we have worker safety issues. Most recently, the murder of Deidre Silas and Pam Knight in 2018. Promising DCFS investigators whose lives were cut short in the line of duty, where many others have just been assaulted. Questions need to be asked about all of these situations and candid answers provided by the director. Stories detailed in the Chicago Sun-Times and elsewhere paint an incredibly sad picture of the state failing the children under our care. Director Smith previously acknowledged DCFS's dysfunction, and he wanted to take ownership for those failings, not passing the blame, not passing the buck to the previous leadership. But he has had 3 years, challenging years, yes, but the director needs to address the issues, and that is why we need these public hearings. Ultimately, the buck stops with our state's chief executive, Governor Pritzker. So far, Governor Pritzker has been silent on the issue. It's time he speaks up for the children of Illinois. I will now introduce Representative Tom Weber.
Hi, thank you. I'm State Representative Tom Weber, and I represent parts of Lake and McHenry counties. I've been working to try and rectify the problems with DCFS ever since AJ Friend was murdered by his parents after DCFS failed him. He was a bright young boy who was taken from us too soon, but sadly, the tragedies in DCFS haven't slowed down. I filed and co-sponsored numerous pieces of legislation that I think will help, but the Pritzker administration has just sat on the sidelines. Just this past month, we witnessed another DCFS failure, 6-year-old Damari Perry of Lake County. He was killed by his own family. DCFS records show Damari was in the foster care system in Illinois because his mother, Janie Perry, had already lost custody of her other children due to DCFS investigations. 2 years later, all her children were returned to her care. DCFS had 2 investigations before the boy's death, including an abuse and neglect investigation where Damari's mother wrote a threatening message about harming the boy. DCFS failed again, and we are left with another avoidable tragedy. Over the weekend, police found little Damari Perry's body in Gary, Indiana. His family had claimed he went missing after his sister brought him to a party. That claim was false. It allegedly turns out that someone in the family was upset with Damari and put him in a cold shower as punishment. The frigid water was turned off only after Damari vomited before becoming unresponsive. His mother then dumped his lifeless body and an abandoned property in Gary, Indiana. Children like AJ and Damari were innocent, and we left them unprotected. All told, from 2010 to March 2021, 1,122 children who had contact with Illinois Department of Children and Family Services have died. A mind-numbing, horrific, horrible figure. If that's not a crisis, I don't know what is. As a father, I cannot wrap my head around it or justify the inaction by our governor, by our legislature, and by the director. DCFS policies and practices have also resulted in undue harm to children through the actions of the agency itself. When we do take children into the state's custody, we cannot even then ensure for their well-being. 356 children in the state's care were hospitalized for months longer than necessary 2021, all because DCFS could not find adequate placements. Our state is failing at the single most important job we have, the care of our children most vulnerable. And Governor Pritzker has remained silent. It's not just the children that have suffered. Pam Knight was assaulted and eventually died in 2018, checking in on the welfare of a child, despite bills filed since the no law has been passed to ensure the safety of these frontline workers. And now another DCFS worker, Deidre Silas, as young mother, is no longer with her family because she was murdered on the job. DCFS and Governor Pritzker have failed DCFS workers and the children who need the state's help. The children in these horrific situations are the most defenseless people in Illinois. They are being left to suffer by the Pritzker administration. Governor Pritzker has showed he is not willing to act, so it is time that Democrats and Republicans join together in the General Assembly to truly reform the failed policies of this agency. Thank you.
I'm State Representative Steve Reich. I represent the 63rd District in McHenry County, adjacent to Tom Weber's district. Between the murders of AJ Friend in 2019 and Damari Perry's just last month, one thing has remained constant: the utter failure of DCFS to protect those who are supposed to be in their care. For the past 3 years, members of the House and Senate of both parties have tried to peel the onion that is DCFS to find the root causes of their failures. And the only conclusion that we could draw is that the agency is irretrievably broken and that no amount of money will solve its systemic failures. As has been pointed out previously, just last week, Director Mark Smith was found to be in contempt of court because of the agency's failure to move 2 children from psychiatric hospitals into therapeutic or specialized foster care. The agency's defense was that it was unable to find such care when in fact the agency had closed almost 500 residential beds since 2015. Parenthetically, I would ask, like my colleagues have done, where's the governor on this? He's been silent. He's missing in action. This is a man who's not afraid to run in front of a camera every chance he gets, but on this one, he has been totally silent. Governor, it's time to speak out on this issue. Our foster care system is in shambles, largely because of what we try to do with the best intentions is to keep families together until the situation becomes intolerable. And then we run to the courts to remove children from their homes. But by the time that happens, kids are often too scarred, physically, emotionally, and mentally, to be put in traditional foster settings. They end up in psychiatric hospitals when they're ready for discharge, there's no place for them to go. Moreover, we know that there's a self-awareness among DCFS leadership that their organization is systemically flawed, in that it is overly bureaucratic and unresponsive, and that while they see the problems, especially with regard to certain staff, there's only so much that they can do. We're aware of an unfortunate part of DCFS culture where commitments to bright lines regarding workers' rights, DCFS protocols and procedures, and specifically assigned duties can take precedence over the results and fulfillment of ends. Right here, this book, this is called Procedures 300. This is the book that DCFS agents have to use in order to investigate cases against kids. It's mind-numbing to read this thing. I think that anybody watching this press conference would spend a very instructive period of time looking at this. So what we have is a situation where DCFS investigators have to choose between what is happening, what the evidence of their own eyes is telling them, or what's in the book. If they want to keep their jobs, they have to do what's in the book. So I don't know where to go from this, but the primary responsibility of protecting children in a community should belong to the community, not the state. In my opinion, the agents designated to protect children in a community should be primarily accountable to the community, not the state. The child welfare system will not work unless there is accountability at the local level and accountability to the community that's being served. But I want to point out, the blame doesn't lie solely at the feet of a government agency. It also lies at the feet of a drug epidemic where children are too often abandoned, shoved to the side, or exploited to raise money for drugs. It lies at the feet of men who thinks their job as men is done when they make a child. The job of a real man is to take responsibility for and help raise that child. These aren't problems that a government agency can fix. It's our problem. The issues facing child welfare in this state don't lend themselves to sound bites in a press conference. All we can do here is let you know that we're not running away from this, but that it takes everybody to solve this problem, and it needs to be done now because these kids are being lost. Until we stop treating children as chattel property, either of their parents or of the state, and start treating them as citizens with rights, this cycle of failure will do nothing but continue. I'm going to throw it over again to Representative McCombie to finish up.
Thank you, Steve. And boy, you said it so perfectly. And again, today, for all of you, we're here to call. Actually, you know what? We're not here to call for it. We're here to demand a public hearing. We are demanding a public hearing. As Leader Durkin stated in his letter this week to Representative Lilly, we are tasked with protecting the state's most vulnerable residents, a mission both Republicans and Democrats can agree is essential to the state. Democrats, you need to step up and you need to schedule these hearings now. And Governor Pritzker, wake up and break your silence. This is not a partisan issue. Don't make it one. And every day that we don't get a response is every day as Illinoisans, we should hold the majority party in contempt. Now we'll take some questions.
All right, thanks everybody. As one last reminder, if you have questions, you can text them to me at 815-985-9567, and we'll go ahead and get started. From Greg Bishop, what have conversations on this issue with Democrats been like?
I'll take that one, Rachel. Greg, thanks for the question. Like I said, for the past 3 years, I've been on a working group that has done a really deep dive into DCFS, its procedures, its policies, where it does things right, where it does things wrong. And the communication between the members of the Senate and the House, Democrat and Republican, have been very, very cooperative, collegial, and good. The question is, what can we do to fulfill what we have found in those discussions and move it into policy? And that's the question of a broader discussion that we need to have among not just the members of our working group, but among all the members of the General Assembly. And again, this is an administrative agency that is under the control of the governor's office. The governor needs to take the lead on this, and he is not doing it.
All right, next question comes from Dave Dahl. Any person knows DCFS has been a mess for years. Under administrations of both parties, simply changing out the director again is far from enough. So really, what are you going to do about it, for example, when we get a Republican governor again?
I'll take that one, Rachel. I don't think it matters if it's a Republican governor or a Democrat governor. The bottom line is that every new governor puts in place their new directors, whether it's their friends or they're trying to give them a pension bump or whatever the case may be. We need to put people in place in our agencies, regardless of their politics, regardless of our friendships, regardless of the favors we owe them. And I'm not implying that is this particular case, but it happens all of the time in the state of Illinois. When we're in audit, every time I come up with a new director, and we've had all new directors since Pritzker's been in place, every one of them has to answer for the findings of previous directors. And in some cases, and I think this one, there's been, what, Steve, 15 different directors, because it is a huge animal to take. So if you don't have somebody who's going to be in place, regardless of your politics, that's willing to dig in, get rid of all the layers of government. I mean, from my understanding, it takes years to even change a form in the state of Illinois. This is ridiculous, and it doesn't matter on the politics. We need to put people in place because they have the ability to actually fix things, regardless of our politics.
All right, our next question comes from Jim Leach. Do you support a budget increase for DCFS to hire more frontline caseworkers?
I'll take that one and the answer. Tom, go ahead.
All right, sorry. In my short time in Springfield, this is one of the things that has angered me the most. And that is when politicians think they can fix a problem by throwing money at it, or just it needs more employees. When you have years of failure, you can have all the employees you want, you can add all the money you want, but failed leadership cannot be fixed by more money or more employees. When you see a pattern of, children taken away from a mother, then returned to the mother. Years later, child is found murdered. These are patterns that aren't going to be fixed by more policy, by more money. This is something that can only be addressed by an investigation of the failed policies of DCFS and its leadership. Thank you.
Representative Reich, did you have anything to add on that?
No, the only thing I would add is the fact that Tom is absolutely spot on there. This isn't going to be solved with money. This is going to be solved with systemic change. And that is a heavier lift than throwing money at something. The heavy lift comes from acknowledging that you got a problem and figuring out where that problem is and how you fix it. I think that what we've done in our working group, and I mean, we interviewed all of the directors of DCFS, including Mark Smith, going back to Jess McDonald. And so we've got a lot of evidence here of what actually has happened to this agency over the past any number of years. But the fact is that nothing is being done to solve it. So what we need to do is stop focusing on the budget. I mean, they get $1 billion a year. I think that DCFS myself should be a case intake and a case management agency, and let investigations and things like that be handled more at the local level. So that's a start. That would be my suggestion. But the fact remains is that I'm just one legislator among 118, and this is a discussion that all 118 of us have to have.
Hey, Rachel, I just want to add too. I was just looking at my notes, and when the question came up about money in this particular case, the 13-year-old, it would have, if he would have been placed into the right place, it would have been $1,700 a month. The shelter that he's actually confined to costs more than 5 times that at $97.15 a month, $9,000. So, I mean, just that alone is a cost saving. So it shouldn't be about money. And also, what is wrong with having a public hearing and letting Mark Smith speak about his agency? There is nothing wrong. If there's nothing to hide and nothing to hold back, let's have the public hearing and let's hear from him. I don't think the answer is, let's can the guy right now. I'm going to guess the governor will make him a scapegoat, and so he'll blame everything on Mark, and so he'll be sheltered from it. But fact of the matter is, we need to hear from Mark.
All right, thanks to everybody who joined us today. If you have any follow-up questions, you can reach out to me at rbold@hrs.ilga.gov. And thanks for joining us.